Welcome to the Tough Decisions Daily Show with your hosts, Dan and Dennae Hanford. As entrepreneurs and real estate investors, we are faced with tough decisions on a daily basis. These tough decisions can either make us or break us. On this show, you will hear from highly successful people sharing their stories behind tough decisions that they have had to make along their journey of success. In every episode, you will be able to learn from the thought processes behind the tough decisions that were made. Some of these decisions will have amazing outcomes and some not so much. So without further ado, your hosts, Dan and Dennae.
On the show today, we have Ben Lovro. He's an entrepreneur, real estate investor, business innovator, and social media personality. Founder of Envision Home Solutions, which is a real estate investment firm out of Columbia, South Carolina. Owner of Envision Entertainment, a professional entertainment company providing mobile DJ services for weddings, private events, and corporate functions across the East Coast. He's also the host of the Hustle Project podcast, an entrepreneurship platform, sharing some of the best kept secrets and insights by interviewing entrepreneurs and real estate investors from across the globe. And visionary at Ben Lovro Success Strategies and Leadership, a mindset and performance incubator encouraging this generation to seek truth, inspire change, and find purpose. As a student of personal development, Ben is fueled with passion for growth. His journey has been paved with hard work and determination. In 2014, after serving just over 5 years behind bars, he set forth on a mission to overcome the patterns of his past. With a new outlook on life, Ben had a God-sized vision and big dreams that had to become a reality. He strives to be an example to others as he shares his story and lives his life every day as an open book. It doesn't matter who you are or what you have done. There is nothing that can stop a person with the right mental attitude from accomplishing their goals. Born and raised in Santa Fe, New Mexico, Ben currently resides in Lexington, South Carolina with his wife and 3 children. His hobbies include reading, writing, working out, DJing, solving real estate problems, networking, creating content, and seeking to add value wherever possible. Welcome to the show, Ben.
Thank you, man. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm honored at the opportunity.
Well, that was quite an extensive, background that we read through. Can you fill us in on some of maybe the gaps that we didn't really talk about, and a little bit more about where you've been from and where you are now and kind of that process?
Wow. So that's tough. I'll rewind my story several years. Growing up, I was always heavily involved in sports. I was an athlete and very passionate about it. Got into high school and started running and gunning with some of the wrong crowd and, started occasionally using drugs and making some bad decisions for the most part. At the age of 22, I caught a big case, ended up serving 5.5 years in prison, which, long story short, that was the best thing that ever happened to me. God got a hold of my heart and transformed my life from the inside out. Moved out to Columbia, South Carolina in August of 2014. Never really been to the South in my life. My auntie and uncle helped me reestablish. And, I basically built everything from the ground up. So I started waiting tables at the Blue Marlin, a nice seafood restaurant downtown. For about 3 years, I would just work relentlessly and save, work and save. And in the midst of that time, read a lot of entrepreneurship books and leadership books. And when I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki, that's where my entire perspective shifted. And the course of my life from that moment forward, really changed. So I started pursuing real estate with every ounce of my being and figuring out what I had to do to kind of step into the industry. I realized that I had to do something radically different than most. If I was to get back into college and, put myself into a bunch of debt and get a 4-year degree, well, that's great, but I'm just going to turn around and be presenting that piece of paper black and white to, a corporate executive or whatever the case may be. And with my background, it might look a little tougher carrying a jacket like that. So that's kind of what spurred me into the real estate industry and why I stand where I do today.
So obviously, in looking at your background here, there's, I think I'm looking at 4 different, ventures that you have right now. Is that correct? About 4?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's tough because they say you can't chase 2 rabbits and catch one. You got to really have that centered focus, which I've realized. So initially I started out with the entertainment company. It's a little bit of my background, DJing and playing events. I figured, well, it'd be cool to grow a large company and be able to perform for weddings and stuff. But after reading 7 Habits of Highly Effective People and thinking about one of the strategies begin with the end in mind, it kind of changed my perspective of what that would look like. What am I going to do as a 50-year-old DJ? So main focus now is real estate. Entertainment's a great side hustle. And, the podcast, the content, and the leadership platform kind of just stems off of that.
Okay. So the one you started first was the entertainment one, Envision Entertainment, and then the other ones have kind of sparked from that.
I would say so.
So, obviously, your background is very cool. Like, even though you've been in prison for 5.5 years, that part's not cool. But
right.
Obviously, that's one of the things that has got you to the point where you are now. Like, if that didn't happen to you, I don't think you would be where you are today. You would be, either in the same, space where you were then, and eventually you're going to be put back in jail or whatever, put in jail. But that time in your life really changed you. So from going from that position there and going from, the waiting of the tables at the Blue Marlin and to where you are now, obviously you've had some tough decisions to make along that way and along those transitions. Can you talk to us a little bit about, first, a tough decision that you made that really didn't go so well?
Interesting. Okay. Well, I would base that back to when I was making bad decisions and making a decision to run and gun with my friends and try to hold up a drug dealer. That landed me a 5-year sentence in prison, which, long story short, it took me through that event, and hitting rock bottom allowed me to look up and realize that, my life as I know it is never going to be the same. So every little decision, large or small, is going to have some type of an impact as far as where I'm going to stand in the future. And recognizing the power behind that decision, I think, is what really encouraged me to step out and start investing in myself, and taking this entrepreneurship path. So,
in looking at this, I see that your very first business was actually the drug business. Would you say that?
Yeah, for sure.
As an entrepreneur, your very first business was selling drugs.
Yeah, that's correct.
And I don't know if you ever really thought about it that way, but that's basically what you were doing, is you were selling drugs. And, the decisions that you made at that time obviously weren't the ones that you're proud of, but that's where you came from. Is you had your very first business as selling drugs. And obviously you had something come up where, you had to take some additional force by, like you said, holding up that drug dealer and with a gun and that kind of thing. And that's kind of where you eventually got, slapped upside the head, if you will, by God, and threw you in prison for 5.5 years and tried to help change you, right?
Yep. Best thing that ever happened to me.
Yeah. So moving forward into whenever you got out, you were in New Mexico at that time?
I was.
Okay. And so what was that caused you to want to move to South Carolina? Was that your family?
Had a little bit to do with my family, had a lot to do with the circumstances of my case and just knowing the hurt that I cast on a lot of people. But also, and I'd say the main reason for moving out here was recognizing that it was just a toxic environment for me to be around. Recognizing that putting myself back into the same position where I got out, even though my life had been transformed, it could compromise my position by running around with old influences. And, I did burn a lot of bridges in my past and realized that, there is a place to make amends, but at the same time, you have to recognize when the right time is to move on and to, turn the chapter and start writing a new story.
So you basically left New Mexico because you wanted to put yourself in a different environment that would keep you from going back into possibly where you were before.
Yeah.
And maybe not necessarily going back into it, but, being around those other people, I think would make it harder for you to continue to make the decision to, stay where you are, but that also they might not understand why you are doing what you are doing.
Right. It's hard to even just like, Jesus went back to Nazareth, to where he was born and grew up, and he was rejected, in his own town. He came with a ministry, with a message, to go against and radically shift what a lot of the leaders of that generation were doing, but his own people didn't accept him. I guess it's kind of weird to contrast it like that, but I just realized that I had to do something different. Whatever I had done up until that point wasn't working. And sometimes the best thing you can do is just change your entire environment in order to shift your circumstances.
Well, and I see that in other areas as well. For myself, I'm a practicing chiropractor, and I say practicing, I adjusted my wife last night. So, I'm not seeing outside patients right now, but, I when I first decided where I was going to set up practice, I really didn't want to go back to my hometown to set up practice because I think that I kind of had a mental block or a thought that it would be hard to have people that helped raise me as a little boy
Right.
come to my office and actually seek treatment. And so there's that dynamic that I can see as well, where, you're out there trying to make amends and also try to help other people and things like that. And in your own community where you grew up, you don't have that good reputation that you really wanted to have, but you can step away from that, go into a new environment and really start from scratch is really what you're talking about.
Could not have said it better. People see your journey, and they knew you when you were younger. They saw your progress. They've seen your mishaps and your mistakes. So it's hard to accept you at your best when they've seen you at your worst.
Yeah, right? I would definitely agree with that. And do you still have any, contact or friends from, back in New Mexico, or did you completely turn everybody away?
Like stated in my bio, I try to live my life as an open book. I'm very passionate about leadership expression. I'm passionate about the change that I've experienced in my life. And I want people to see that. I want people to witness that for themselves and to see, the man that they used to know me as, that used to like to party hard and, life of the party, wild guy, to, this guy's actually taking the necessary steps to try to implement a plan to better his life. So yes, to answer your question, I do have some very, very good friends. One of my groomsmen at my wedding came out. So it's good. And my family's still back home. So I try to make it back at least once a year.
Sure. And I know this might be hard, but can you pretend that there are people listening from New Mexico that you grew up with, and what would you tell them right now?
Well, due to the environment and what it's like in New Mexico, I would say it doesn't matter where you've been, the choices you've made, you're the only person that's hindering your journey. There's nothing that could stop you from living the life you want to live. You just got to understand the power of your mind. The mind's a very powerful thing. It has a way of attracting like things. So the very energy you put out there into the world somehow has its way of manifesting itself into your life. And like the famous Tony Robbins quote, it's in the moments of decision that your destiny is shaped. So you just got to think about every small little decision compacted over time. And I hate to run on with it, but think about something so easy as sitting down for lunch. You have the choice to drink a glass of water or a soda. Well, that very small decision probably does not hold a whole lot of significance in your life at that time. But that very decision compacted over time, over say a year's period, is going to have some kind of a significant effect on your health, right? The sugars, calories, everything else. So when you think about the power behind your decisions, over time, they play a large and significant role in the person that you are becoming.
I would definitely agree with that. Let's talk about a different decision. Let's talk about a tough decision that you've made since you've been out, since you've had these businesses, and it might have been a really tough decision. You spent some time thinking about it and which direction you're going to go. Talk about one of those tough decisions and maybe a really positive outcome that came from one of those tough decisions. I'd
say the toughest decision business-wise since I've been out here was the decision to leave the restaurant. That was my safety net, I got out of prison making $45,000 a year waiting tables, which is better money than I'd made in my life, So it was my safety net, and although I was working on my businesses on the side, I wasn't consistently closing enough deals. I wasn't bringing in enough consistent revenue for that to make sense. But at the end of the year last year, I used to set a lot of goals and overcomplicate things, but I realized you don't have to make your goals too difficult. Just write them down and make it happen. So towards the end of the year, I made 3 goals for myself: buy my house, buy primary residence, leave my job, and get married, in that order. So I needed my W-2 income to leave the restaurant, so I got pre-approved, bought my house. And from the time that I bought my house, it was like a 2-week process to move into the house. I was on a pickup schedule at the restaurant, and I kind of just didn't go back. I made the decision and I left. And then I proposed to my wife now. And
you recently got married, didn't you?
I got married in March. So we're going about 2 months strong.
Awesome. That is great. So how long were you working part-time before you decided to leave? I think you said you were there for 3.5 years, right?
Yep.
But how long were you working part-time on your other businesses while you were keeping the W-2 income?
I would say about a year.
Okay.
I mean, the entertainment company started probably mid 2015.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't implement as much as I could have with that. And of course, there's a lot of larger players in the game that I didn't have as much experience playing at weddings. Like in the past, I played at nightclubs, dance venues, and that kind of environment. So not only the music, but the whole presentation and demeanor was much different. So I made the decision 2015, and then that was a process to really learn the industry. But the real estate started end of 2016, beginning of 2016. Anyways, about 2 years.
So when you decided at the end of last year, or that's when you decided to really step away from, the W-2 income, was that a good decision for you?
It was the best decision that I ever made. I mean, it cleared my mind in so many ways, not being tied down to a job where I knew I was going to be surrounded by negativity, and allow the course of actions with other people, whether that be the people I'm serving and the attitudes that they're carrying around to affect my life, as well as just being surrounded by that kind of environment. It weighs you down and it stresses you out after a while.
Mm-hmm.
So it really gave me some clarity as far as what the next best steps that I needed to take were.
Did you have any money set aside before you stepped down from the W-2 income to make sure you had a little bit of a buffer?
I did. So I saved up a bunch of money. I bought my first property, which was an investment property out of state. I bought it sight unseen, a lot of risk. Long story short, I sold it, made a little bit of money. So I had a good little buffer in my real estate LLC account that I knew I had enough to continue my marketing at least for a 6-month process.
So you had like 6 months reserves before you stepped out.
Yep.
Yeah, that's great. So can you share with the listeners something that you like to do when you are facing a tough decision? Is there something you do in regards to crawling up in a corner in a closet in the fetal position and crying, or do you sit down and pray or talk to other people? What is a strategy that you have found to be effective in when you are facing one of these tough decisions?
I would say the power of prayer is a beautiful thing. Anytime I face a tough decision, first thing I do is I pray. I just pray for discernment that I'm going to make the right choice. And then I think about it, I make a plan, and figure out what I need to do to execute. That simple.
That's great. Do you have a favorite book that you have read recently that has helped you make better decisions as an entrepreneur?
Ooh, there's so many, man. Well, as far as automating my business, The 4-Hour Work Week by Tim Ferriss is a fantastic book. It just really talks about hiring out help, hiring on VAs, which you can get a VA for $4 or $5 an hour out of the Philippines who speaks better English than you do. And they're already trained, pre-programmed, they're a fantastic asset to any business. So automation with Tim Ferriss. And then I would say John Maxwell's book, Developing the Leader Within You. He just talks about the fact that there's a stark difference between successful and unsuccessful people. And it's not that successful people have less problems than everyone else, but they just ask better questions. And as a result, they find better answers to those questions.
Mm-hmm. Well, both of those people, those authors, were in the process of trying to get on the podcast. So that was two unsolicited plugs for Tim Ferriss and John Maxwell. So we've actually reached out to both of them. So if you could do us a favor and tag them somehow in this interview, or send them a message and kind of get them on the podcast, that'd be great.
Absolutely.
Also, for our listeners, the more we can have multiple people reaching out saying, "Hey, we want to get you interviewed," the better it is. So that's great that you recommended those books. I've actually read both of those books. So those are very good books for anybody to pick up and read. At this point, you're still kind of in the newer stages of your journey and your entrepreneur background. Even though, we started back, before, the pre-prison days, like we had talked about earlier. At this point, what is the most exciting thing that you have done with the money that you have made up to this point?
Well, I own a house in 5 states. I mean, they're lower income houses, but my passive income strategy at the moment, because I don't have a ton of capital, we're building it, but it's to buy these lower end auction properties, which in turn I'll turn around and owner finance, buy a property for $5,000 to $10,000. You can put somebody in the property. I mean, property might need a little bit of work, but you're giving someone an opportunity of home ownership where they're paying less money than they would be paying probably renting an apartment in that area. Put them on a 5 to 7 year note, and you're making like a 60 to 80% return on your investment.
And at the same time, helping somebody else have an actual home that they wouldn't have had otherwise.
It's huge. So you got your active income, you're grinding it out, trying to make deals happen and put things together. And then you're putting your money to work, right? That's really the only way to escape the modern day slavery, right? Of what our system is built for us.
Yeah. So last question here is about your bucket list. So what is the number one thing that you have on your bucket list right now?
Wow. Well, I would say trying to impact as many lives as possible and to tell my story, because I believe that we all have a story to tell, and many of us don't realize that until we're asked to tell it. So I just want to impact as many people as I can, because as crazy as it might sound, my story is the most valuable asset that I have.
Yeah. It's what shapes us and what allows other people to be able to connect with us as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. The more we can share our story, the more people will understand who we are and will be better connected with us.
Right. I could not agree more.
So how can the listeners reach out to you if they want to find out more information about you or connect with you somehow, or maybe have some further questions after this interview?
Sure. So you can find me at Ben Lovro on all channels: Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube. You Google my name, you'll find benlovro.com, which connects me to a lot of accounts as well. You'll probably pull up some of my dirt too, but that's just part of the story, Yeah. But simply type in Ben, BenLovro. I'm the only Ben Lovro in the world.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much, Ben, for taking some time out of your schedule to be with us, and hope you have a wonderful day.
Thank you. You as well, Dan.
Do you want to nominate a highly successful entrepreneur or real estate investor to be a guest on this show? Email us at dan@toughdecisions.net. Help us by spreading the word about our show with your friends, and also take time right now to subscribe and leave a review on iTunes, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, or your favorite platform. You've been listening to The Tough Decisions Show.